Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have to continue my reviews with Stranger Grayson, whose channel I linked in the description section of my video, for the Friday the 13th movies. This is the third video about this. This is for a film that I have the DVD for. I don't know what happened to the box. I had the box years ago. I guess I got rid of it or put it away in some other box. I don't know. I still have a lot of totes down in my basement of stuff. So I might have the box somewhere. I don't know. I looked around for a long time, never could find it, and then I gave up. And here I am, showing you just the disc of Friday the 13th Part 3, or 3D, however you want to call the title. This one says Part 3 3D, which is not as clever as Part 3 or Part 3D. Anyway, just have the disc here. It's the only one I don't have a box for. Like I said in one of my previous videos, I used to have the dual pack, kind of like I showed you with Part 1 and Part 2 in my reviews, of Part 3 and Part 4. And I don't have it anymore because Mom's ex-boyfriend stole it. And, piece of shit. Anyway, Part 3. I had a controversial opinion in my previous video that I talked about. And Stranger Grayson surprised me too, the guy I'm collabing with for these reviews. A great reviewer recommended, please check out his channel, like I said. He had recommended about the same thing I had said about this movie. Now, my interest with his review, I was waiting forever for him to finally talk about these movies so I could specifically hear his thoughts as a younger guy. He's probably like 10 years younger than me, maybe actually a little bit younger, maybe 12, something like that. Anyway, he's a teenager, and I wanted to hear what a teenager who may or may not have grown up on these movies, I don't really know what Grayson has or has not seen over and over again. It seems like he has seen Part 3 quite a bit. I was curious to hear what his thoughts would be as a young man coming to these reviews and talking about these movies. Because I am very much of the camp that's very controversial. Like I said in my previous video, I am not a fan of Part 3 at all. And that's the thing. I get a lot of heat online for claiming that on any part of the internet because the fans of Friday the 13th seem to really have fallen in love with Part 3. And I don't really understand why. To me, I even like Part 1 more than I like this. And I wasn't super obsessed with that when I was growing up, or even now. And like I said, the more I watch that movie, the less I like it the older I get. And Part 3 is one that I just... every single time I've ever seen it, I just don't like it. I think it's boring as shit. I think there's nothing happening here. I don't like the implications on Jason's character and what they claim that he has possibly been like after Part 2, or possibly during Part 2. I don't like the implications on Jason. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. If you don't know, then you don't know. But a lot of people miss that detail because it's so brief and so vague of what Jason might have done to one of the people that are coming to the camp this time around in the movie. And I don't like that shit. I think it's bad. Now, let me not get too ahead of myself. Let me start off with the 3D portion. Once upon a time, when I had the box for this thing, I watched it in 3D, just out of curiosity. And I had maybe seen the film with its beautiful cover art I used to see all the time in Hollywood Video. I think I rented it one time when I was a kid, when I was obsessed with Friday the 13th, and I realized there was one of them I had missed, which was Part 3. And I remember not liking it all that much, and eventually when I bought all the movies, I had this special set for just Part 3, which is where this disc came from, and it came with the glasses to watch it in 3D, and I tried it out. And the 3D in this film, I can speak from experience, even though Stranger Grayson couldn't, I will speak from experience. The 3D looks like shit. I don't care what anybody says. I've had this conversation with many people about classic 3D with the blue and red glasses versus modern 3D with the real 3D or whatever it's called. I understand the differences, but the use of it is my problem typically with either version of 3D, the classic or the original, or newer. You know, I have an issue both times with both versions of 3D because I think it typically sucks. This is no exception. Friday the 13th Part 3 might be the worst 3D film I've ever seen, aside from the first one I ever saw called Spy Kids 3D. It's awful. It's awful. Everything that's supposed to pop in your face are things like yo-yos, sticks, an axe handle, or whatever that's called. What Like, it's constantly things like that. The 3D is so wasted, and that's a shame, because Steve Miner came back to direct this again, the same guy who did Part 2. And as I said in my review for Part 2 yesterday, I think Part 2 is very effective. Very eerie, the suspense building is incredible. It's almost perfect as a Friday the 13th film. It's almost one of the best, well, it is one of the best in the series, but it's very close to being the best of the series in my personal taste and opinion. But Part 3, I'm surprised it's a Steve Miner film. Of course, he made Halloween H2O, he made House. If you haven't seen either of those, you're really missing out. House especially is really underrated. That's a great horror comedy type of thing. Really good. I want to see Stranger Grayson talk about those at some point. Anyway, I love Steve Miner's work. I fucking hate this movie. I think it's just bad. All around bad. I think everything about it's bad. The only good thing that comes from this film is, of course, this is the beginning of Jason Voorhees using what is now known as his iconic hockey mask. And I do agree that's a great addition, even though behind the scenes everybody argues about it, because I think everybody knows in their head that this movie sucked ass, and the only reason the fans like it, in my personal opinion, is because of the hockey mask. That is the defining trait of this movie that every asshat you talk to on the internet or in real life will tell you, is that how could you not like Friday the 13th Part 3, because that's the one where he gets the hockey mask. Okay, boomer. No, I don't give a shit about that. It's a nice little quality. It's just like if I watched Annabelle, and it had the Annabelle doll in it. Let's say I'm a big fan of that, and then I love that movie because Annabelle's in it. I hate Conjuring 2, and just because it takes place in Connecticut doesn't impress me. You know what I mean? Like, little details don't make a good movie. That doesn't mean anything to me. And this is an icon of horror, an icon of the 80s we're talking about, so it's kind of important. It's like Michael Jackson and the One Glove. You know what I mean? Like, I get where people are coming from when they say that weird hockey mask, this is the one with the hockey mask thing. I get what you're saying. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me because the movie is still boring as shit. For an hour and a half, it feels like a 2-hour movie. A draggy-ass 2-hour movie. Now, with all that venting out of the way, I am still not completely sure why everybody are going to the cabins this time around. They're not opening up, as far as I could recall, a new camp. They're not opening up a new Camp Crystal Lake, as far as I could tell from what I understood watching this movie. I tried my best every time I've watched this in recent years, which is almost every other summer that I sit through this shit, that I try to focus and get the details right on why the fuck are these people at the camp. And the only thing I can come to is that it's kind of like Evil Dead 2013. One of these folks were attacked about 2 years previous, which I don't know if that was like in the midst of like the 5-year gap between Part 1 and Part 2 that they talked about in Part 2, or is it like post Part 2 and now we're in like 1987 or 88, or what year is this movie taking place in? I never could place it. It's my fault, maybe. I didn't pay attention to all the details because I hate this movie so much, and at certain points I just tune out. I'm gonna be honest with you. But I don't know when this movie takes place, and I don't understand why they're there. But one of the girls got attacked. She's kind of our final girl in the movie. She got attacked at this camp 2 years previous. We're assuming that it wasn't just like an attempted murder. It was a lot more, like rape and some other things that are very controversial to talk about. And it makes you sad for her. But then they ruin those moments of emotion for her and her performance. She's a good performance. I think that this actress is good. I think she's fun to watch. She's a sweetheart. But then you get to the parts where they show flashbacks to show who attacked her, and you probably can guess who that was. What the fuck? Why? Why did we go that direction with Jason Voorhees? I understand there wasn't an entire franchise after this movie yet when this was made, but it just seems like a poor idea. In my personal opinion, it seems like a poor idea constantly used in this movie that even a lot of the fans that I talk to that love this one because it's the one where he gets the hockey mask still don't seem to recall that's a detail. My mom loves this movie, thinks it's one of the best of the series. I love her deeply, but Mom, every time I bring it up to you, you don't know about that vagueness about implying Jason is this and that. I don't like it. I think it's weird. Anyway, moving along though. The fellow playing Jason this time around, I believe is the same guy, Richard Brooker, I believe is his name, from Part 2. I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. Regardless of whether it is or isn't, he does a solid performance for the most part. This is also a film, too, where when Jason gets hurt, he yells. Or he grunts, or growls, or whatever. He does that a lot in this movie. which is surprising because I've never really picked up on that detail. I don't know why. I guess it's because it's my least favorite, and again, I tune it out every time I watch it. But I still don't understand why the kids are there. I guess it's a moral support thing to help this chick in like a therapy way to get over her attack 2 years previous. Kind of, again, like an Evil Dead 2013 thing where they're trying to help their friend get over drugs and her addiction to like meth or heroin or whatever it was. It kind of reminds me of that. Maybe it's a throwback to this movie, I don't know. But let's move let me try that again. Let's move along to the writing. There are 2 scriptwriters on this film. One of them, I think, was involved a lot with Tarantino films, and the other one was actually a South Park staff writer, which was surprising to me to check this out as a Steve Miner film with a South Park writer and a Tarantino script supervisor or something like that involved with this movie. What happened with this? Why is it so bland? To be fair, all of those things came after this, like a good 10 years, 15, 20 years after this. So it's kind of up in the air about the quality. They're getting their feet on the ground, trying things out. And I don't think, as far as I know, Steve Miner ever come back. But I do know that one of the writers for this movie, I think the staff writer for South Park, I believe, is the one who did this, was also the person who wrote Part 5. I could be wrong. It could be the other guy. But somebody involved with their script writing here also wrote Part 5, which is one of my favorites. As controversial as that is to say, in this controversial review for Part 3. Yes, Part 5, say what you will, to me is one of the best of the series. I don't care if it's oddly pornographic. I don't care if it's oddly super gory. I don't care if it's odd in a lot of ways and controversial amongst the fan base because of some of the twists in that movie. One in particular that you might know that I'm not going to spoil here in case you haven't seen it. But that movie has so much happening in it, and it's so much more fun to watch than something like this. I don't care if it feels more sleazy. It's more fun because of that. It embraced what slashers should have always been, in my personal opinion. Maybe not as sleazy, but just as, I guess creative is the word I'm going for. Part 3 doesn't feel like that to me. I don't care what you say about it. I don't care what you compare it to. Even by the time its release in 1982 happened, Part 3 to me does not have the creativity that Part 2 or even Part 1 had. And I don't think it even has much in the way of kills being better than Part 2, which I think Part 2's kills were way better than Part 1. Part 1 I think are kind of bland when it comes to kills. To be fair, it was 1980. But Part 3 has a couple of really good kills in it. Really good kills. The effects look really good when they're used in this movie. There's one scene where somebody gets their hand chopped off. It looks fantastic. I just wish it was in a better movie. That's my whole issue, is that I wish it was in a better movie overall. I miss Baghead Jason just a little bit. The older I get and the more I love Part 2 as I watch it over and over again, the more that I wish we had more Baghead Jason. I know we kind of got that in the remake, but you know what I mean. I mean, he looked great there with Derek Mears, but still, I mean, we didn't get everything that I wanted with Baghead Jason, but, you know, I understand why they moved along, and I prefer the hockey mask like most people do. I think it's much scarier. I think Part 2, if I remember correctly, I think The Town That Dreaded Sundown came out before or around Part 2, so I think that kind of influenced their decision to get away from that. But even if we had just like a maskless Jason, I would be scared of that too. I'm gonna be honest with you. That would be frightening as well, to see that guy running up at you in the woods with his fucked up eye and his weird grin with his crackhead teeth. I mean, that would freak me out a lot if I saw that in the woods by myself, or even with friends. It would still scare me. I wouldn't care if I was in a group. We might not win. You know, it's Jason. But anyway, moving along to the writing. The writing is not super strong, and again, the movie itself is kind of dry, which is weird for Steve Miner and both of those writers. But the dialogue is okay. You have some performances in here kind of slowly segueing over to the character thing. The performances and the characters themselves I kind of like more. Like, you have one couple who are like they're about to have a baby, not like immediately in the next couple of months, but like they're like 6 months out, you know what I mean? And then you have like the final girl chick I talked about who has a trauma that she's dealt with. I like her a lot. There's good people in this. You have a couple of potheads that are like the real first ever, like Cheech and Chong potheads, but it's like a dude and a girl. The one looks just like Cheech Marin, and the girl just is a girl. I think they're married. I could be wrong, but they seem older. Why are they hanging out with these young kids? Those guys seem like they're like in their 40s, and the one looks like he'd be like an art teacher. He looks like an art teacher I had once upon a time. But why are they hanging out with these young people? I don't understand who these people are, why they're there. I don't know. And I still don't understand why anybody is there, so whatever. You know, who cares? The cinematography of this movie, to me, doesn't look as good as Part 1 and Part 2, but I noticed that the camera work, once again, kind of improved over Part 1 and Part 2. Even though Steve Miner made Part 2, to me it's very clear with the locations, the different places we're able to go. We're not stuck to just a campsite most of the time like Part 1 and Part 2. They weren't always there, but they were there most of the time. This is kind of at different locations constantly, and I really like that a lot. And the camera work being better, the clear-cut budget, and the film itself looking better than ever, I think is clear evidence that he had a bigger budget to work with this time around, which is good. I'm glad Steve Miner got the props that he deserved. And I'm glad that the company put more effort into making his movie better. Well, you know, technically better, but not like a good movie. It looks better. And I like the different sets we go to, like that. At the beginning of the film, we follow like a guy and his wife. The wife has like hair curlers. She's really annoying. We follow them at their shop/house that they live in. And that's a cool location. I don't think I'd ever seen anything like that in any movie ever, for that matter. So I thought that was kind of nice. The locations are cool here. Now, moving along to the practical effects. Again, I kind of briefly touched on this. They look really good. I really like most of them. I think they have a lot of oomph to them. I think they can be effective depending on what kill we're talking about. And I like a lot of them. There's also a lot of throwbacks to like Fangoria magazines, which was kind of nice. Let's talk about the music. I believe Harry Manfredini once again came back and did the music, which is about the same par of what we had in Part 2. Again, I've said this constantly in my Part 2 review. I'm not a massive addict to what is known as the Friday the 13th theme song, or that style of music, the constant cello and violin thing. I am not into that as much as most people. I know that carries in all the way to like Part 6, where they start actually using rock music and stuff there. But Part 5 and backwards, they don't really do that. They kind of stick with the Friday the 13th music, and I don't really love that like most people. I just kind of think it's okay, it's fine. It kind of suits these movies as their own artistic style at that time. But I'm glad it evolved out of that by the time we hit Part 6. I really am, because I think it needed to, in my opinion. But for here with that music, it doesn't really help anything. It just makes it just as dry as the movie itself is. And I will stand by the fact that this movie is dry as shit, and I don't understand why everybody likes it. I'm glad Grayson did. He seems like kind of more like me, like kind of negative to it. It's not a complete loss of a movie, but it has its moments. It has some good kills. It has some good performances. It has a cool Jason performance, even though I think he looks very much like Frankenstein in this movie. Have you noticed that? Like the original Boris Karloff OG movie. He looks a lot like Frankenstein. The way he walks, the one scene with the axe in his head and his arms go up at the camera to kind of scare you because it's 3D, that sucks. He looks a lot like Frankenstein in a lot of ways. There's a lot of homages to that in this. And in the series in total, like Part 6 when they bring him back with electricity. And that's kind of nice. As a big Frankenstein addict, I'm glad to see that. Because Frankenstein is very underrated. The whole series is. I don't care what anybody says. So, Friday the 13th Part 3, not a big fan. I showed you my little disc here that I can't bother to buy a new a new sleeve or a box or anything to put this in. I just don't care. I have something else. It's basically like a gray time capsule looking thing that has little slots out that you put discs in when you didn't want to keep cases. And I used to have that. I used to do that with some of my movies and DVDs and stuff. So I have that in there most of the time when it's not in these videos. But I can't bring myself to buy another DVD set, man. If I saw it for like $1 at like a Dollar Tree, I'd buy it again. But otherwise, I can't do it. I don't like this movie enough to spend like $10 on it, or even $5 on it to buy a new box or anything. I just can't do it. I'm sorry. I'm just cheap. I'm cheap like that, but I spend money on other stupid things, and other things that I actually want, you know, so whatever. Anyway, when it comes to Friday the 13th, Part 3, or 3D, or Part 3 3D, whatever you want to call this shit, I have made it very clear I'm not a fan of this one. I think it's one of the worst of the series. Up there with Part 9, up there with, what's another good, well, I guess Part 8 is pretty rough too. It's up there as a really rough one. But from this point on, from Part 4 onward, to me, most of the time, they're fantastic home runs. They know what they are, they're doing it well, even for films that people don't like Part 7. I think from Part 4 onward, we have a lot of home runs. You'll be seeing a lot of positive reviews from me for really good shit in all of those movies. But anyway, for right now, Part 3, if I had to rate it on a 5-star basis, I think I'd give the movie like probably a 2 out of 5 stars. Like I said, it's not a complete loss. I kind of dread it every time I have to go watch it. But it's not a complete loss. It has its moments. It has things about it that I like. But man, is it dull. It's such a dull movie. I don't understand why people defend this shit so much outside of, it's when he got the hockey mask. Shut up. Who cares? It's nice. It's nice. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate Steve Miner for that detail. I appreciate that. But it just doesn't make this movie better, in my opinion. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. It doesn't make me feel better about it. Moving along, though, to part 4. Tomorrow, we will see what happens there. God willing, I'm able to watch it tonight and tomorrow and get it done. Anyway, thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Let me know your thoughts about Part 3 and the Friday the 13th series in the comment section down below. And once again, please check out Grayson's videos in my description section. Great guy, love his content. I've been friends with him for a long time, like 3 years I think it's been. Really cool guy. Anyway, thank you all. God bless you again. Goodbye.